So what I'm basically going to do today is I'm just going to run through every series, a little bit about each matchup, kind of what I'm looking for, and then I'm going to give my predictions for it. And I have a little bit more to say about some series than others because I watch more teams or some teams more than I watch others, but should be a good time. I'm just going to give a couple more minutes, see if we get a couple more people in here before we fully get going. But thanks for tuning in right at the start. Appreciate it. I've got my lovely Paris mug. Feeling a little European today. And if you have any questions or anything as I'm going through, pop them in the chat, and I'll try to address them, assuming I don't lose track of the chat. Who's going to win Defensive Player of the Year? I think it'll be Gobert, and I think it'll be by a lot. I think his impact is pretty undeniable. I think the Jazz having the best record in the league is a big factor. And I think honestly, him being a center is a big factor too. Is something I don't love about the Defensive Player of the Year race is big men kind of have an outsized impact on who is on defenses, and so Defensive Player of the Year as a result almost always goes to a big man. Whereas perimeter players, I think they play a very important role, especially in certain matchups. But yeah, I think it's going to be Gobert by a pretty wide margin. All right, I'm going to get going here with my playoff predictions. So first up, I'm going to talk about the Sixers and the Wizards. And this one, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on because I think it is not going to be that close, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be very entertaining. I love watching Westbrook. I love watching Embiid. But I really think the Sixers are just like they're perfectly built to match up with the Wizards. The Wizards, you've got these two small guards who like to attack the rim, and then the Sixers basically have a bunch of elite perimeter defenders, and then they have Embiid at the rim. It's just going to be so hard. You just go under against Westbrook. Maybe you put Simmons on Westbrook so he can roam around off ball a little bit and help on Beal and the Wizards' other shooters. And then it just is going to be a big problem for the Wizards to keep up with the Sixers at all. Like I think like Alex Len and Robin Lopez, they'll give a little bit of physicality to Embiid, but they really can't touch him at all in terms of talent. And then yeah, I just think the Sixers perimeter defense in particular is going to be really tough. So yeah, I just don't think it's going to be that close of a series. Simmons on Westbrook, maybe Thibault on Westbrook for a little while, or one of them on Beal. Then you still have Danny Green's length, like just not a good matchup. So, there's a chance that the Wizards get hot. Davis Bertans hits 7 threes or something, and Beal drops 40, and Westbrook goes crazy, and they eke out a win. But I'm going to go Sixers in 4 for this one. I just don't think it's going to be a particularly close series. So that's that one checked off, and X factor for the series. I'll probably go. I'm going to go with. It's. I don't want to go with one of the star players, so I'm going to say X factor for the series is probably going to be Danny Green. I think Danny Green is a little bit underrated, just in terms of what he adds in like basketball IQ, and his shooting is fine at this point in his career, and he still gives you that great size on the perimeter. Just a smart overall player. So I think he'll be important to the matchup. All right, now I'm going to go on to Nets against the Celtics. This one is interesting, but it will be a lot more interesting if the Celtics were fully healthy. They're obviously going to miss Jaylen Brown, all-star caliber player, and a nice wing to put on one of the Nets, MVP candidates, to be honest. So they'll definitely miss him, and they're also going to miss Robert Williams a lot as well, I think. Especially with them moving Daniel Tice at the trade deadline. That was kind of a cap move, but now without Robert Williams, they don't really have somebody to fill that void. Tristan Thompson gives you good size, but he doesn't give you that same mobility that Robert Williams and Daniel Tice would give you. And then he also doesn't give you that vertical threat that Robert Williams would give you, that lob threat. And so I just don't think that is going to be. I think the Celtics are really going to miss that. You've got the KD Tatum matchup. That's a great two-way matchup. Both guys pretty solid defensively, elite offensively. Obviously, Tatum was unbelievable in that play-in game, and he's been on a bit of a tear recently in general. So that'll be interesting to watch. But I just don't think the Celtics have the horses without Brown and Williams. You put so Tatum's on KD. Now you put Smart on either Harden or Kyrie. That's about as good as you can do on those guys. And then you just don't have that third really nice defender to throw on the other one of Harden and Kyrie. And Kemba will fight hard on the perimeter, but he's just not that level of defender. The path to winning this games in this series for the Celtics is it really is if the Nets have a bit of a letdown, because obviously the Nets haven't played a ton of games. I think their big three has only played like less than 10 games together. I'm pretty sure it was 8 games. And so that they might take a little while to feel it out. The Nets, I could also see them taking a game or two, like where they just get down and they don't fight as hard as they could to get back in it, just because I don't think they're going to feel threatened at any point in this series. Especially with the Celtics missing the guys that they are. So yeah, I just don't think. I think that is how the Nets could possibly, lose a game, maybe 2. But really, in order for that to happen, Tatum basically has to play as well as he did against the Wizards, which is possible. But then I think they would also need to get a big performance from Kemba in the same game. And maybe even, Marcus Smart hits 5 threes or something like that too. So it could be a sweep. I agree with you, Peace and Hoops. But I'm going to go with Nets in 5. I think the fact that the big three are sort of like working their way back a little bit, don't have a ton of time to gel, and the fact that they're not really going to feel super threatened, I think they're maybe just going to take their foot off the gas one game. If they get up 2-0, 3-0, it just the Celtics might just outfight them in one. Next one I'm going to talk about is Nyx Hawks. These are two teams that I don't spend the most time watching because I don't really consider either of them to be contenders. So I don't have quite as much to say about this one. This will be a big series for Randall. I think Capella is going to need to be big at the rim. DeAndre Hunter just came back a few games ago, 3 games ago. And so it would be nice if he had a little bit more time to work his way in. I guess they've had this week off, so that's a little something, but it's not quite getting up to game speed. So he's going to have to match up with Randall some of the time. John Collins against Randall, that's a tough matchup. Maybe you throw Capella on him for a little while. But one of the big things in this one is the defense of the Knicks is really impressive. I was just looking at some of their stats, and they are number 1 in opponent field goal percentage within 5 feet of the rim, and number 1 in opponent 3-point percentage. So they're the best at defending at the rim and best in opponent 3-point percentage. That's a tough combo to beat. The Hawks aren't overly defense. They don't rely, they're not the highest frequency shooting team in terms of threes either. So I think that'll be kind of interesting. I think it's going to be difficult to go up. Like the Knicks just have a lot of shooters on their side. I was looking down the roster at just kind of how guys have fared this season in general. A lot of guys over 40%, or around 40%, and that's just tough to do, especially when you have guys like the Hawks do, where it's maybe not the greatest mobility in the world, getting around the court. I kind of feel the Knicks in this series. I don't feel super strongly about it. I think these are teams that both have a lot of talent and both have some growth that they need to do to sort of like take it to the next level. And I could see either of them just coming up a little bit short just because of some flaws they have in the roster. Uh, for the Hawks, I think it's gonna be really important to stay home on the shooters and let Capella do his thing at the rim if they can, because otherwise they're gonna get into trouble. Uh, for a prediction for this series, I'm gonna go Knicks in 7, but I think this is really one of the more unpredictable series, and I could see it being either team in anywhere from maybe even 5 to 7, really. Like, if Trae Young just has a bad series, then it's over. Or if Julius Randle doesn't perform to the level that he did in the regular season, then the Knicks are really going to struggle because he's such a hub of their offense. But I don't really expect either of those things to happen. And if one of them is going to happen, I think it would be that Trae Young gets shut down because of the Knicks' elite defense. So that's sort of what I'm feeling there. Bucks Heat. This is one I want to talk about a little bit more in depth because this is a very important series for the Bucks, I think, in particular, and also very interesting in light of the fact that they matched up last year in the playoffs as well. Uh, so I was just thinking about, like, okay, why is this year going to be different from last year? And the number one reason is Drew Holiday, and people have talked about this before. It's not anything terribly novel, but you take Eric Bledsoe off the floor, and Bledsoe just does not want to be a shooter. And so you help off of him and force him to get the ball and hesitate for a second. It gives your defense time to adjust. And the Heat are really good at taking advantage of those kind of things. So you take him off, you replace him with somebody who's not only just as good defensively, if not better, but also has that offensive upside that Drew Holiday does. And now, not only can you not really help off of Drew the same way, but he can sort of take a bit of the burden off of Chris Middleton as a second man. Chris Middleton can kind of be like a 2A, 2B type of guy instead of the definitive number 2 guy. And that is going to be really important for the Bucks, I think, too, because you've seen him stumble at times. Last season against the Magic, he just had an awful series. And some of that even carried over against the Heat. So that'll be interesting to see kind of how it shakes out. And the other big thing, I was a little bit more leaning towards the Heat for this series, or I would have been if the Bucks had never picked up Tucker at the deadline. I think he gives them a nice switching element, which, the Bucks aren't elite at switching. There are counters to switching, but I mean, last year it really was like drop coverage or trying to figure out a switching defense on the fly. And this year, I think it's looking a little bit better in terms of the Bucks, the shooting that or the defensive versatility that they can roll out there. Whether that will be employed properly by Budenholzer and the Bucks is really the like X factor of the series, because I think the Bucks have the talent to win not just the series but the title this year. But I just don't know how it's going to be deployed, because so you've got Giannis, Middleton, and Drew. They're going to be in all your big lineups. They should all play probably 40 minutes a game. And I think the minutes restriction BS that Budenholzer was doing last year, I don't think that is going to happen this year. I think he just cut enough flack. I don't even want to say he learned from it. I just want to say he cut enough shit for it that he knows he's fired if he does it again. So that's one factor. But so you got those 3 guys, and then you have the option of you can go with Lopez if you can get away with that drop coverage, or you can go with Tucker, or you can go even smaller with Portis and Forbes or something. But overall, the thing that I just like is that the Bucks have some more counters. Last year, they couldn't necessarily run at the level of shooting that they can this year. They didn't have Bryn Forbes. I'm not sure what Dante DiVincenzo's 3-point percentage is this year. Let's look that up real quick. Milwaukee Bucks. Yeah, I'm just gonna check out their stats real quick, just on their shooting that they've surrounded Giannis with here. So yeah, they've got Drew Holiday, Dante DiVincenzo. Yeah, he's shooting 38% from three this year. Like that's pretty solid. Brooke Lopez, his 3-point shooting fallen off a little bit over the last couple years, but I mean he's about at the level he was at last year, I think. Bobby Portis has been like a revelation. One of one of my questions is like coming into this season, I don't think anybody would have said that Bobby Portis is a 20-minute per game guy on a team that is trying to win a championship. Uh, but I mean, it's hard to argue with the numbers that he's putting on. Like, if you can put a 40%, and he's shooting 47%, so 40% is a big drop off from what we've already seen so far this season. But if you put an extra 40% shooter around Giannis, that's a big deal, even if he comes with some defensive downsides. Um, the defensive downsides can get out of control if you have like Bobby Portis, and then you're trying to like run out Bryn Forbes as well, or I don't know, DJ Augustine or whoever. So I it could really compromise their defense in some ways, but I also it gives them different looks. And sort of this is what I mean when I say the Bucks have the talent to win the title. Like some combination of these guys feels like it should work, uh, but I'm not 100% sure if they'll get there. So I think that's going to be an interesting series. Uh, I think one of the other things that's different for the Heat this year is that they're missing Jay Crowder, and Jay Crowder had a really great series for them. One of the things about him is he is not the tallest guy in the world, but he is super jacked, and that is part of what you need to start to form a wall against Giannis. So that's a big deal. It's not just Bam Adebayo, it's not just Jimmy Butler. Like you need those kind of secondary, tertiary guys where you start switching and they can hold up pretty well. They got Ariza to replace him. They still have Iguodala. Those guys are getting up there a little bit, maybe a little bit of a fall off. But Jay Crowder, the other part of what he did so great last year was he also shot the lights out in that series. He was over 40% for the series, and so I think you might miss that. And then the other things that are, it's not even different. It just is like last year, Goran Dragic had about as good of a season as you could ever expect him to have. Tyler Hero had as good of a series as you could expect him to have. Duncan Robinson, he didn't have as good of a series, but like the Heat basically were firing on all cylinders last year and got the win. And I think they just took a little bit of a step back with the Jay Crowder thing. And then I'm not 100% sure if you're going to get that same level out of Tyler Hero and Goran Dragic. But I mean, that being said, I absolutely think Eric Spoelstra is one of the best coaches in the league, and I think he's going to give them a run for their money for sure. I'm going to go with the Bucks. I'm going to go with the Bucks in 6, but I will not be shocked if it gets pushed to 7. I also won't be shocked if it goes in 5 either. I don't really. What I was about to say, I don't think the Heat really have a great chance of winning this series, and I would be surprised if they won. But every time I get here with the Bucks, I'm like, it is Budenholzer against Spoelstra, and that is just sort of the underlying theme of the Bucks postseason. And I think it's going to be a factor in every series, probably. Even if the Bucks get past the Heat, then they have to go against the Nets, who have a ton of talent, and then they have to go against the Sixers, who are one of the few teams who can match their size. So this postseason run for the Bucks is going to be particularly interesting. I'm curious to see how it shakes out. So I'll go Bucks in 6 for that one. All right, now we're going to head over. I'm just going to check the chat here, see what's going down. Not a lot. All right, Bucks over Nets. Maybe Bucks over Nets. To me, that series will be close to a toss-up. I would give the Nets favorite status, but not by much. All right, Jazz Warriors or Jazz Grizzlies, TBD. But let's say it's Jazz Warriors. The Jazz are in a little bit of a tricky spot heading into the playoffs. Donovan Mitchell hasn't played a game in over a month. and then you're going to come back against, a team like the Warriors, who at the very least has Draymond and Curry. Wiggins has been playing pretty well this season. So they have some weapons. If you're trying to like work your way back into shape, that's tough. Mike Conley is still working his way back after missing a few weeks. So it's like you have your starting backcourt working their way back in, and that just is going to be tricky. I don't think the Warriors are to be taken lightly. I think Curry against the drop defense of the Jazz, I think he really has the potential to give Gobert fits. And I think if Clay was playing, like, the Warriors would be close to title favorites. And we've seen Gobert struggle against these elite ISO 3-point shooters like a James Harden in the past. And if Curry is locked in, and you have Gobert trying to meet him above the 3-point line or even switch. I don't think the Jazz will do a ton of switching, but if Gobert has to step up above the 3-point line, the Jazz don't have a ton of other great defenders to cover over what would be missing if Gobert gets out to the perimeter. So there's some potential weak points to exploit there. Unfortunately for the Warriors, I think they just don't quite have the firepower to get there. And so I don't see them really taking more than a game off of the Jazz. I'll go Jazz in 6. I think with Mitchell and Conley coming back, Curry's good enough that he can win you one game just off of an electrifying performance. And then, I'll give him another game for that backcourt coming back. So yeah, I'll go Jazz in 6. But I don't think it will be like a 6 where they feel super threatened. Like, I think it'll be kind of a bit like the Nets Celtics series, where the Nets aren't really going to feel threatened, and I don't really think the Jazz will either, regardless of whether the media tries to portray it that way. And if the Grizzlies happen to win tonight, then I think it is probably most likely a sweep for the Jazz, because Gobert is exactly what you want against a point guard like Ja Morant, who's trying to attack the rim all the time. Then that drop coverage looks great all of a sudden. You can live with Dillon Brooks if he comes off screens and tries to shoot, 15 threes or something. Like, that's not the end of the world. Valanciunas would present a bit more size down low for him to deal with, but I don't think it would be a super tough matchup for the Jazz. Maybe they drop one with the backcourt coming back. Like, I guess something I didn't consider too much is it, like, if Mitchell's on a big minutes restriction or something. I'm not really sure what his status is like. It seems like he's still not even certain to play in game 1, although I highly suspect he will. But if he's, if he can only play 25 minutes or something in his first game back, that could be a problem. And the Jazz might also be a little more conservative with that if they match up with the Grizzlies instead of the Warriors. I'm going to save Suns Lakers for last. I think that's one of the more interesting series. Nuggets Blazers. This is another one kind of like the Celtics, where it's a little disappointing that the Nuggets aren't fully healthy. Murray's out for the entire playoffs. Barton's out for a while. PJ Dozier's out for a while. They might come back mid-series, but it sounds like they're probably going to miss at least the first game and maybe more. Nuggets have the number 11 ranked defense, number 6 ranked offense. And one of the stats that I found interesting was the Nuggets allow 42% of opponents' points on threes, which is the 5th most in the league, which is a problem against the Blazers because they love shooting the three. They shoot 45% of their shots from three, which is number 3 in the league. So basically you have the team that lets up the 5th most threes and the team that shoots the 3rd most threes going up against each other. So this is probably going to be a 3-point barrage from the Blazers. Picking up Norm Powell towards the end of the season, one of the best corner 3-point shooters in the league. That's huge, especially when he can play off of a guy like Dame. The way Dame forces the defense to adjust to him, and then you get it to Norm on the weak side to attack. CJ on the weak side to attack. It's just like a lot of weapons. Carmelo. So I think the Nuggets are going to have their work cut out for them defensively. They've been an okay defense. Jokic is fine. They have Facundo Campazzo. He's done well on the perimeter, especially for a rookie. Aaron Gordon has been a little bit of a blessing there. And then, you're working with Michael Porter Jr. As well. He's got good size, even if he's not a great defender. So I think that'll be interesting. But the flip side of that is, like, the Nuggets still do have the number 11 defense, whereas the Blazers have the number 29 defense. So you're looking at the second worst defense in the league, but also the Blazers have the second best offense in the league. So really, I think the Blazers are going to want to turn this into a shootout as much as they can. And I think they're going to be fairly successful at it. The Nuggets were a team that I think they could have gone to the conference finals if Murray had been healthy, if their whole team had been healthy. I think their ceiling is considerably lower now, and I think that fact is going to make this series more competitive than it would have been if they had been fully healthy. So, I mean, I guess, silver lining, kind of a crap silver lining. But can the Joker just take over? I think yes. I think he's made big strides from like 2 years ago when he would just disappear for long stretches. Like, I think he sort of has found his aggressiveness a little bit, and just what he showed this season, especially after Murray went down. He gave a really great showing, deserving MVP winner. He will win it. I think the Nuggets ultimately are going to have enough to win this series. But I think it's going to be a good one. I think the Blazers are going to take probably 2 games off of them. I'm going to go Nuggets in 6. I could see it going anywhere in the 5-7 range. I don't think it's going to be a super big, like, one-sided blowout or anything. And this is a series where there's potential for an upset, because, like, the Blazers have a very, very potent offense, and they might just come out in the first 2 games and blow the doors off and steal both of them. Like, that's not a crazy thing to me. If Dame comes out, drops 40, CJ and Norm combine for like another 50, and all of a sudden, like, the Nuggets are sweating. But ultimately, I am going to go with the Nuggets. But I won't be shocked if the Blazers manage to pull it off against them. All right, Clippers, Mavs. This one went to 6 last season. It probably would have gone to 7 if Porzingis didn't go down. But I don't know. I don't believe in the Mavs that much. Like, Luka is very good, and he has a lot of very good players around him, but it just seems like they are maximizing kind of what they have, whereas the Clippers, I think, can like take another step up in the playoffs. We know what Kawhi is capable of. We know how great Paul George can be. They have Serge Ibaka this season. That is a potential game changer. At the same time, Serge Ibaka coming back from injury, he'll want to take this series to kind of work himself back into shape. But I sort of believe in what the Clippers have going. They're the number 1 3-point shooting team in the league. Number 1, both above the break and corner 3-point shooting. 4th highest 3-point shooting team in NBA history, which is insane. Like, that's unbelievable. Especially with the increased volume that's happened over recent years. It's like, it's very impressive. One stat that goes against the Clippers a little bit is they've allowed the highest efficiency in the league versus pick and roll ball handlers. That's obviously a big team against a big deal against a team that has Luka Doncic. Shout out to John Schumann for some of these stats I'm throwing at you. But I just ultimately, I don't think the Mavs, like, they have the number 21 defense in the league, and the Clippers are the number 1 shooting team in the league. And I just think that's a recipe to lose. The Mavs' path to victory is really like a crazy series from Luka, really like a like a savant performance, which I mean is possible. It's not out of the question, but I just don't think uh I don't even think that would quite be enough. Like you need Luca to have like a godlike series, but then you also need the shooters around him to be absolutely raining threes. And the some of the Mavs really good 3-point shooters, like Jalen Brunson, come with defensive downsides or just at least not defensive upsides, and so that could be a bit of a problem for them. And so I'm going to go Clippers in 5 this year. I think they learned a little bit from last season. I think I think they're just going to be tuned in a little bit more, and they just look like they're balling every time I watch them play. I just kind of believe in them, especially in this series. So I'm going to finish off here with Suns and Lakers. And I think this is going to be a really entertaining series. So the Suns have the number 7 offense and the number 6 defense with not a lot of weak spots. They like to run out a lineup with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, and Jay Crowder, and then DeAndre Ayton for most of the time, a little Dario Saric as well. But that's like, there's not a lot of weak points to attack there. I know Devin Booker isn't like a defensive lockdown guy, but he's great offensively, and he's okay defensively. Like he's not one of these guys that you can just punish over and over and over. He's got pretty good size to him, and he'll battle. And then like another part of what makes the Suns so good is they have a really good coach in Monty Williams. And then you also have Chris Paul, who is, basketball genius essentially. And so like game planning strategy stuff, I feel like they're not going to get lost in the weeds too much. That can happen with young teams. You've got Crowder, like I mentioned earlier, that he was one of the keys to matching up with Giannis last year. You throw a bit of his heft at LeBron. You throw Mikal Bridges at LeBron. I mean, nobody can stop LeBron, but you can make his life a little bit more difficult. The Suns have a net rating in clutch situations. So last 5 minutes, game within 5 points. Their net rating is plus 9.3, which is amazing. That's, I mean, that's got to be one of the best clutch marks in the league. I didn't write down what their rank was, but that's very impressive. But I mean, the Lakers are the Lakers. They're the defending champs. They're defending champs for a reason. Number 1 defense, number 24 offense, but it's skewed by lack of stars. I don't think the overall season stats are particularly telling for much for the Lakers, to be honest with you. I don't think they have a huge margin for error in this series. I think if they go big too much, it is potentially going to be a problem. Like that lineup I mentioned of Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, Devin Booker, Chris Paul. Like if you're going to try to have Anthony Davis on the floor plus, Andre Drummond or whoever, that's really you're going to have a hard time getting out to all those guys on the perimeter, especially if you throw Dario Saric out there. So then maybe you want to put Anthony Davis at the 5 more, which I know the Lakers are obviously willing to go to. They went to it against the Warriors the other night. But they also do seem to insist on trying their 2 big lineup all the time, or every game at least. And I think if they try it too much, they might run into trouble early on in the series and just dig a hole that they can't quite get out of. Like if they try to do that in both of the first 2 games, they might go down 2-0, and it's always tough to come back from 2-0. So that's something to be conscious of. But that being said, the Lakers are still the Lakers. I did want to say, like, if the Lakers do decide they're not going to go big quite as much, then I think Wes Matthews could be a very important piece in terms of perimeter defense. I also think Alex Caruso might get some more minutes. He's shooting 40% this season as well from 3. Very impressive. So those 2 guys could be big X factors in this series. And then the other thing that I mean, I haven't mentioned his name a ton, is LeBron. He's still LeBron. He's coming back from injury, but I mean, he looked great against the Warriors. And the thing in particular that I keep thinking about is if you watch that Warriors game in the fourth quarter, he just like powered his way to the rim, like so impressively. Like he just is unstoppable. And that is sort of something that it's easy to forget about with LeBron. He sort of takes this orchestrator, facilitator vibe, a lot of shooting this season, that kind of stuff. But when you watch him in the playoffs, he does a lot of the time just decide like, okay, we need a bucket. I'm going to the rim and I'm either going to get fouled or I'm going to dunk it or lay it up. Like he's still one of the most unstoppable players in the league. And even if you play great defense on him, a lot of the time it's not enough. His drop off has not been that substantial. I don't think he can sustain that for a whole series of just like attack the rim, attack the rim, attack the rim, like he might have done in Miami or Cleveland even. But he can pick his spots and orchestrate the game well enough and put a bit of the load on Anthony Davis. So I mean, as a Raptors fan, we've seen what LeBron can do a lot, and so I'm gonna go Lakers in 7 in this one because I just can't bet against LeBron in this series. But this will be one where I'm not shocked if it goes the other way. I think the Suns have a lot of talent, and I think it's very easy to just say, oh, well, the Lakers, the defending champs, but the Suns are for real, I think, and even if they go down in the first round, I still think it's been an incredible season, and there's no shame in losing to the defending champs if they do it. Has Mark disappeared for the Lakers? Man, I don't know what's going on with that. Like, I just don't get it. Like, maybe he looks worse in practice and stuff, but I think his like defensive communication is worth a lot. He still is shooting at a reasonable clip this season. He's, I think he's still over 40% from three. Not that he's ever been a huge volume guy, but it's not like Andre Drummond is giving you a ton offensively either. So personally, I would be playing Gasol over Drummond or Montrezl Harrell even, but I guess the Lakers feel differently, and they're the defending champs. So who am I to question them? Does anybody have any questions about any of the matchups or anything at all, really, basketball related? The number one series that I'm looking forward to this year, from the first round, is in the East is that Bucks Heat series, and in the West is the Lakers Suns, because I think we're going to learn a lot about whoever wins those series. Like if the Bucks win that series, I think it's going to speak to their versatility a little bit. It's going to speak to the utility of Drew Holiday as a Bledsoe replacement. And if the Suns beat the Lakers, all of a sudden it's like, well, they have a pretty good shot against whoever comes out of that Nuggets Blazers series, and now you're in the conference finals, and who knows at that point, they held up the second best record in the league all season. So I think that's going to be really interesting. And if the Lakers do manage to knock off the Suns, I do think that's a pretty impressive feat. And I think it probably makes me feel more strongly about their ability to make a really deep, a finals run, essentially. In terms of overall series that I'm looking forward to, I'm actually looking forward to a lot of matchups in the East beyond the first round, because whoever comes out of that Bucks Heat series is going to have to play the Nets. And I think that's going to be amazing. Like, I think Nets against Bucks, if that happens, fingers crossed, I will be really interested to see, because the Nets have as I mentioned, only played 8 games with the big three together. They have the number 22 ranked defense, and the Bucks sort of have the defensive I don't know, the defensive guys to match up reasonably well. Like you put Giannis on KD, you put Drew Holiday on Harden or Kyrie. I don't think you want. I think you want to hide Chris Middleton somewhere else. But maybe you put PJ Tucker on KD even. And you put Giannis on Harden and slide Drew down to Kyrie. Like there's a lot of potential. I don't know why the Bucks let Torrey Craig go. That drives me insane. I think he could have been really nice for them, but obviously something wasn't working behind the scenes. So I think that's going to be a really great matchup to see sort of how much the Nets' relative lack of defense is going to hinder them. Because one of the ways that you stop Giannis, like his inevitable parade to the rim, is you have to really get physical with him. And the Nets don't necessarily have that type of defenders. But on the other side, the Nets are like the incredible offensively. And so it's going to be interesting to see if the Bucks can keep up with that, even with their defensive advantages. So I think that'll be really interesting. And then whoever comes out of that, I think the Sixers are almost a lock for the conference finals with their matchups. Like no way they lose to the Wizards, and then they should beat the Knicks and the Hawks in 6 games max probably. So then you get the Sixers matching up with the Nets or the Bucks. And the Sixers are one of the few teams that have the chance to actually match the Bucks' size, because you've got Embiid, Simmons, Danny Green, like I mentioned. Like those are all big defenders. So that's pretty interesting. Matisse Thybulle off the bench. And then the Sixers are interesting. They've got a little bit more shooting around Simmons and Embiid this year. So I think that's going to be a step up. Tobias Harris looks a lot better. Oh, I can't believe I didn't mention Tobias Harris yet. But he's having a great season as well. So I think that's going to be really interesting. And sort of that I think they're just being slept on. Like they're the number 1 seed, and I haven't heard anybody talk about them for a long time. They're just kind of cruising along. So yeah, I think there's a lot of like the second round and conference finals matchups are going to be really interesting in the East. And then out West, I mean, Lakers Clippers conference finals would be hard to beat. But really any of the matchups are going to be interesting, because there's so many questions surrounding the playoff viability of the Jazz and the Suns and what they've been able to accomplish. And I am a pretty big believer, especially in the Suns. And so I'm curious to see if they advance past the first round, what kind of damage they can do, and if they can make a finals run even, because they're just as there are a lot of talented teams, and I feel like this year more than ever there are more teams to have like a reasonable, like over 5% chance of winning the title, which doesn't always happen. A lot of times it's like, okay, it's going to be one of these probably 2 to 4 teams, and this year I think there are legitimately at least 7 teams probably who have a 5% chance or greater of winning. All right, I'm going to check some questions here. Do you pay attention to the draft at all? Not a ton. There's a YouTube channel called Sub Me In Coach. If you guys want to check that out, I watch his videos sometimes, but I'm more just kind of who I let the draft happen and then see what it's all about. I don't get a ton into projecting how players are going to be or anything like that. Christian Larson, I'll give this a chance to see if you spoke reasonable versus delusional. Oh, I hope I come down on the reasonable side. How are you liking the plan? I love the plan. I think the plan was a great idea. I think they should keep it. I think it made the last third of the season a lot more interesting for a lot more teams. Like as a Raptors fan, the Raptors were like the 10 to 11 to 12 seed for like the last 2+ months of the season, and I still got way more into it than I would have, because they had no chance of catching the 8 seed for quite a while at the end of the season. But I was like, maybe they'll get the 10 seed and do a little miracle run. They didn't, but I have to say I really enjoyed what it did to the tail end of the season, And then also the playing games. I mean, sure, some are blowouts, but it's a single game elimination. It's still entertaining. And then you get some amazing games like the Lakers Warriors one. So that's I think they should keep it for sure. Nate Shepard, Blazers are a sleeper for the Western Conference Finals. I do not agree. I think they can maybe make it past the Nuggets, but I just think that 29th ranked defense is going to come up. It's going to cause them problems, whether it's against the Lakers or the Suns in the second round, especially. Chris Paul should be in the MVP race. I think Chris Paul should be in the All NBA race, maybe not all MVP. I just he's very, very good, but I think MVP is just like a slightly different stratosphere, even if what he's been doing has really been great. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions in the live chat, so I'm gonna sign off for now. And thanks to everybody who tuned in. And yeah, I might do a couple more of these as the playoffs go along. So stay tuned. Thanks for checking it out.